dinner. Today, it's really a good day. We have panelists making up of members of our KZN PPC. We have our Honorable MEC of COGTA, Mr. Shomuga joining us. And we have an agenda for today. We welcome everyone who's live on YouTube, who's live on Facebook, and we will then now have our opening prayer that we're gonna be led on by Commissioner Dr. Bengu. And over to you, Dr. Bengu.
Dr. Bengu, the mic is on mute.
Is that fine now? Can you hear me free? Okay.
Yes.
Father God, we thank you for this wonderful day, and we thank you for each and every person that is part of this great work today. And Father, may we be reminded that for every plan that human beings have designed, there was a divine greater plan that we had for your people all over the world. And Father, we thank you that these plans are now be part of that bigger plan. And Father, I pray that we'll go beyond concepts and words and rather create a situation where your people will experience this transformation. And Father, we also thank you that as we deliberate, our mindsets will be changed, because we can never bring about transformation with our old mindsets. And Father, guide and strengthen every member of this panel and everyone out there listening. And may this moment bring about change that everybody else is going to feel part of, and being part of also the strategy and the plan. We thank you, Father, for the leaders that you've given us. We thank you for the leaders that have prepared this program today. And Father, we thank you. We give it over to you. And we thank you that we've got your wisdom and knowledge, which, Father, we're going to share amongst ourselves. Thank you, Father. And we ask all this in the mighty name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Bengu. On our panel today, as indicated, we've got our Honorable MEC of COGTA, Mr. Shomuga. We also have got the chairperson of the KZN PPC, Mr. Mosiwa. We also have other PPC members joining us as part of the panel. We have Dr. Bengu, who just graced us with the prayer right now. We also have Prof. Gawe. We have Mr. Mtrali. We have Professor Bob. We have Professor Green. And we have Dr. Nzimangwe joining us. We also have panelists who will be assisting us with the presentation. Chief Director from the Office of the Premier, Ms. Metimil. We also have Commissioner Brooks, who will also be assisting together with Chief Director Metimil. We also have our Chief Director from COGTA, Ms. Lisa De Grande. We also have our service provider that's assisting us with the review of the Psdf, Isibuose Africa, being led by Mr. Sbongsen Masego. We also have Rian Thompson from the team, and we also have Team COGTA that are part of the panel, Mr. Rushton, Craig Rushton, Mrs. Mandisa Zungu, and of course myself as your moderator for the day. Colleagues, I'll just flight for us to see the program for today. We have started with an opening prayer. We will then move over to which is next, the opening address by our Honorable MEC. Then we're gonna have remarks from the KZN PPC Commission, and then we'll then introduce our webinar, and then we'll start off with our presentation, looking at what is the background of the Psdf, and then have presentation on both the PGDS and the Psdf review. And then we'll have way forward and question and answer session and then closure. Can I then just ask our participants to use the chat room as the presentation is going on to give us input in as far as questions and comments are concerned. This goes for both, for all platforms, for Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook. Please log on and into the chat room and post your comments and your input. We will be responding as the presentation and the webinar is going on. This webinar, as we have indicated, is for the Psdf review, which is the Provincial Special Development Framework Review, noting the fact that this process is closely linked to the PGDS, which is the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy of our province. What we will then be doing is to ensure that the presentation that we'll be doing today will also be flighted, is going together with the PGDS review. So hence our business of the day also consists of that presentation in terms of what is it that we are doing in terms of the PGDS review. Without any further ado, let me then invite our Honorable MEC, Mr. Shomuka, to then assist us with the opening address.
Thank you very much, Program Director. We really want to extend our greetings to the chairperson of the KZN Planning Commission, Baba Msewa, and the Deputy Chair, Baba Omacengwane. We also want to greet all the KZN commissioners present here, and all the panelists that are present, all officials from different departments, and all the viewers that are present here, Program Director. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be afforded this opportunity to make an opening remarks at this important webinar, which represent the first step in the review of the Province Spatial Development Framework, which is spearheaded by our Department of Culture in conjunction with the KZN Planning Commission. We really appreciate that. Program Director, I would like to borrow one line by one of the Spanish poets, by Anthony. In one of his poems, he makes a statement, an open quote, "We make a road by walking," close quote. This line was also used as a title for the book on education and social change by Paul. In quoting this line, Program Director, in line, I'm reminded by the process of attaining meaningful change is a slow and a step-by-step process. Our gathering today on this virtual platform is an indication that we are commencing on the important journey whose end is the improvement of the material needs of communities within our province, KZN. As we embark on this journey, we do not have all the answers, but we are convinced that the better province is possible, and the step we are taking today will lead us towards such. And it's important, Program Director, to give a provincial context on this regard. And the process of reviewing the provincial spatial development framework is an important one. Hence, we convene this webinar. When we look at our history as a province, we've made a great stride in bringing access to services such as electricity, water, roads, and the provision of houses to our communities, even though we know that we have not, it's not everyone in the province who have this access, while we are trying our level best to ensure that everyone in the province receive these services to our people. All of this we have been able to do without a blueprint of how a province with a history such as ours goes about remarking itself. And indeed, we have made the road by walking. As we embark on this road of reviewing the provincial spatial development framework, we have to appreciate the unique challenges that we face as a province as well as a country here in South Africa. As we embark on this, currently we find ourselves in the midst of what we probably defining moment in our country's young democracy. The outbreak of the novel coronavirus has exposed fault lines within our society. Program Director, this review is taking place during a time when all of us have been forced to think and act in a way that out of the ordinary in order to stem an outbreak of the coronavirus. As the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we remain plagued by the spatial inequalities in our development. A provincial government, along with the local government, have a number of planning and management tools at our disposal to drive the province towards achieving the important objective of the spatial equity. These tools include the development of the provincial spatial development framework. Through the spatial development framework, we can identify areas of a provincial interest around which we can coordinate our effort and investment to achieve the spatial equity. The KwaZulu-Natal Province Spatial Development Framework represents the long-term spatial vision of the province. It is to be consistent with the National Spatial Development Framework. This ensures that all the spheres of government share a long spatial term vision and jointly implement this vision through an integrated development plan at the local level. The provincial Psdf is also a spatial expression of the province growth and development strategy. It indicates where the growth and the development strategy should be implemented and how land should be used to achieve growth and development. The KZN Provincial Psdf is now under review, and the result must guide the provincial government and municipalities towards planning and managing land to achieve the development principles of spatial justice, resilience, sustainability, and efficiency, supported by the good administration. Land has important social and economic value to all of us in South Africa, even in KwaZulu-Natal. It is a limited resource on which we must achieve socio-economic development for all. This planning framework is not just a plan, it is an instrument that can be used to transform who can access land and what they can do with that land, because you can access land, but you must also have a vision to work the land. And today, we are informing the public of our intention to undertake this review and adopt a provincial spatial development framework in accordance with the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act of 2013. The outcome of this review and planning process will impact all KZN citizens' life at the rural and urban areas. It covers all types of land, from town to farms, and from private stakeholder to a public input and a support. Today, Today's webinar will outline the process we intend to undertake and guide how you can engage with the process. We encourage all of the viewers and the participants to support this important process and influence the special vision and objective of this province. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you to our Honorable MEC for those kind and strategic words. The MEC has alluded to the fact that today it is indeed an important journey that we are embarking on. We do acknowledge the fact that as our province, we are coming a long way, and we are a province that is affected by disadvantages in terms of our history, where we have individuals that are not accessing services, but we are pleased to say that even though we did not have a blueprint guide that was guiding us in terms of how do we give access to our disadvantaged communities, we have been ensuring that our communities are provided with those essential services. The process that we are starting today is to ensure that we make a step towards ensuring that we accommodate those needs and ensure that in our stride to develop the tools that will guide us in providing those needs, we develop a vision that will be accommodated by everyone, and it will guide us in terms of how we allocate those services and address our special inequities in our province. And not only that, but also guide us in terms of how then do we work in terms of our land development and ensure that we align the processes that we are doing in the province together with the implementation tools at our local sphere, in our local municipalities through our IDPs. The Psdf would therefore provide that strategic guidance in terms of how then do we link up with municipalities and how do we ensure that planning is managed in all areas to ensure that we achieve spatial equity, spatial justice, resilience, and efficiency. The planning that we will be undertaken is meant to ensure that we address the transformation, spatial transformation that we want in our province, that will guide how we want to work our land. Today, we are developing and reviewing the Psdf in accordance to our national act, which is the SPLUMA, and we want to ensure that the outcomes of this review ultimately addresses the needs and improve the quality of life of our citizens. And it needs to ensure that it guides all key stakeholders, including your private land developers and our traditional councils in terms of how do we need to work on our land. The webinar is intended to outline and give guidance in terms of how do we then engage with this process and how do we impact on the process going forward in terms of us developing that spatial vision for our province. Thank you. Now I will then hand over to the KZN PPC Commissioner, Mr. Mosiwa, who will then give us the opening remarks. Thank you.
Honorable Program Director, Ms. Amanda, Honorable MEC for Kokcha, Mr. Hlomuka, fellow commissioners, Deputy Chairperson of the Commission, Babu Matingwana, esteemed participants, it actually gives me great pleasure to be part of this auspicious occasion, which is about reshaping the development of KwaZulu-Natal. The KZN Provincial Planning Commission is an advisory body to the Premier and the provincial executive councils on matters related to growth and development of the province. In this capacity, the KZN Planning Commission oversees the 5-yearly review of the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, in short PGDS, as well as the annual reviews of the Provincial Growth and Development Plans, which are a subset and implementation plan of the strategy. The Planning Commission is currently driving the review of the 2021 version of the PGDS. Just for the sake of the memory, the last version we had was the 2016 version, which naturally the 2021 version, the Commission aims to present that, plans to present that to the Premier and the Provincial Executive Council later this year. The review of this 2021 PGS is guided by a high-level situational or strategic analysis of where it is that the province currently finds itself, is informed by the reports on the successes and failures in the implementation of the provincial so back and the basis to actually inform what the priority areas or issues that citizens of this province expect in the reviewed strategy. I must emphasize that the PGDS is not just a government strategy for the province, but it is a strategy through which government, business, labor, and civil society reaches consensus on a number of key priority areas for the province, what the collective impact is we want to make, what are the anticipated outcomes we want to see realized, what interventions we will make to achieve our aspirations, and how are we going to be measuring then the performance to ensure that what we plan and what we do actually is concrete, as Dr. Bengo was saying. We are going to do this in a way, and that's where our link is. In other words, where are these interventions going to be taking place in pursuance of the noble objective of special equity? It is therefore not possible to undertake a review of the provincial growth and development strategy by only focusing on what, how, when, and who questions. It's also important for this reason that the special development strategy of the province is an integral part of the provincial growth and development strategy. As much as the Office of the Premier, with the support of the provincial planning, is responsible for our overall growth and development strategy, the specific focus of provincial special planning and its alignment to municipal special planning as envisaged in the Special Planning and Land Use Act, SPLUMA, has been assigned to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, COGTA. Since both the PGDS and the PSD review requires extensive engagement with stakeholders involved, and those stakeholders naturally is government, business, labor, and structures representing civil society. There has been a need naturally to embark on what we call reciprocal interdependence between the PGDS and the Special Development Framework, so that these two run together, because they are the Special Development Framework is actually an important chapter in the provincial growth and development strategies. As we will see in presentations that are to follow in this webinar, the Psdf is not only accommodated as a specific chapter of the PS, but special transformation imperatives are also intertwined throughout the strategy as a whole. It then gives me great pleasure at this particular moment and again, it is for this reason that the Office of the Premier, the Provincial Planning Commission, and COGTA are collaborating in a fully integrated and coordinated approach to manage the review of the PGDS and Psdf. The Planning Commission's participation in this webinar is therefore a clear indication of the extent to which this collaboration is finding expression. We share a stakeholder engagement framework and a plan. We share a common vision and strategy for the province, and we are, after all, in the same provincial government, advising the same premier, the same MECs, and the same executive council. With these few words, I hope that this webinar will set the scene of the other thematic engagements to follow over the next 2 weeks. And we are looking forward to a constructive engagement and sharing of new insights. We do understand that the current COVID-19 is actually restricting us in terms of reaching out to as many people. And it is in this context that the IT platforms that we are currently using are now becoming sort of useful. I hope that we will really get the full engagement, and again, the participants to this webinar, we're expecting a lot of inputs from you, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Musiwa, the chairperson of our KZN PPC. From his remarks, he has indicated that the role of the KZN Provincial Commission is to provide an advisory body to the Premier, and it's a body that is responsible for overseeing the strategic development and review of the 5-year PGDS, Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, as well as the one-year revision and development of the Provincial Growth and Development Plan. He has duly indicated that the last review of the PGDS was undertaken in 2016, and this 2021 review of the PGDS is a high-level review that is looking at reporting on some of the successes and failures that have been observed through the development and implementation of the process, highlighting what are some of the priority areas as guided by other strategies at a national as well as a local level. He has indicated that the PGDS, as it stands, is not just a strategy for government or the province, but is a strategy for everyone. It is a strategy for all business, for all key stakeholders, for all participants, and is intended to ensure that everyone is guided in terms of what the developmental outcomes and performance in as far as our province is concerned. It is also a plan that is packaged to ensure that what we plan and what we implement is actually of concrete, to ensure that our objectives and outcomes are achieved, more especially our key objectives of spatial equity and transformation. And it is therefore in this regard that the essence of the PGDS is enshrined in ensuring that the provincial spatial planning is guided and interlinked through the presence of the PGDS. He has indicated that this process has, the process of provincial spatial planning has been allocated to provincial COGTA And in this regard, Provincial COGTA is responsible for reviewing the Provincial Special Development Plan framework in line with the PGDS. It is therefore not a coincidence, but it's a collaborative and effort between the Commission and the Premier's Office that the PGDS is undertaken together and in line with the Psdf review. He has indicated that the Psdf is indeed a chapter in the PGDS, but not only that, that it's just a chapter, but the special planning imperatives are guiding the development of the PGDS. He has then alluded to the fact that the collaborative effort in terms of how we engage our key stakeholders and participants is mainly through the fact that we share the common stakeholders, we share a common vision, and we have the same premier and same MEC that we are guiding. And in this regard, the communication and participation of stakeholders has been looked at as a collaborative effort. Also, these platforms that we are using now, the visual platforms, are used based on the fact that we are in the COVID-19 process, and due to that process, we cannot meet on a one-on-one or physical basis. And he has then encouraged our participants to participate through the process and provide us with their available comments and input. And I would then like to also remind our participants on Facebook, on YouTube, as well as on this platform, on this Zoom platform, to continue posting the input and comment on the chat room. I can see that we already have some chats that are being posted, and we will encourage that colleagues continue and participants continue to post, and we will then respond accordingly. I will now then hand over to Mrs. Lisa De Grande, who will do an introduction in terms of the background of the Psdf.
Thank you to the Program Director, Zungu, and greetings to our MEC and to the Planning Commissioners and the Chairperson of the Planning Commission, and to colleagues who are here today. I'm going to be very brief. I think a lot of background has already been given to us. So I'd like to concentrate more on some of the specifics around the SDF and the plans. But firstly, let me just remind everyone that the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs has been given the responsibility in the province for the review of the Psdf and for supporting the province around the coordination of spatial planning and land use management. And particularly, this is a particularly important function that we've been given, as has been outlined by the previous speakers. And even more important, because of our role as a department that is responsible for ensuring that municipalities are able to undertake the important function of land use management and development at a local level. The issue of the development of the SDF is a key informant for the province, but also for how municipalities use their land. And I think maybe as a background, I would just like to remind everyone that we are reviewing the Provincial Spatial Development Framework over an 18-month period. But the reason that we're calling it a review is because we already do have SDFs that have been done in the province previously. There is one in existence at the moment. But the difference between the previous SDFs and the one that we're reviewing and developing now is that we are doing it in the context of a new act, and that act is the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act that was passed by our government in 2013. And the purpose behind this act was to try and overcome the fragmentation in the way that we planned previously in the country. And the planning, if people understand the planning system from how it worked previously, is that there were many pieces of legislation from national to local level that were used to plan different areas across our country, and much of it was done based on race. So we would have different planning systems for different races in South Africa, and that has created an enormous amount of fragmentation and marginalization and underdevelopment in certain areas. The passing of SPLUMA is to try and bring our country into a system of one planning framework across all three spheres of government. The SDF, or the development of a spatial development framework, is outlined in this act, and it gives the spatial development framework a legislative basis on which it is done. Previously, we did SDFs without any legislation to guide how it is done. This time, we're doing it in the context of SPLUMA. And SPLUMA is very clear that it is a plan that we must use to manage, that we must develop to guide how we plan and manage our land use, and that this must be coherent across all three spheres of government. So the national government has developed a national spatial development framework. We at the provincial level will develop a provincial spatial development framework that aligns with the national one, and the municipalities each will develop their spatial development framework at a local level that will also align with province and with national and province will take into consideration what the municipalities are, because we are a government made up of three spheres. This is to ensure that the vision that we have as a country is aligned from national down to the local level, and that we work together in the same direction in terms of implementation and development. The other important thing to note is that the Act also is very clear about the role of the municipalities in the implementation of spatial planning and land use management. And in fact, it puts the municipalities in the driving seat around spatial transformation. So as much as we develop one at a provincial level, the municipalities one, which is guided by the provincial and national one, will be put into action through the development of a land use scheme, where they will be zoning areas for different types of development and use, and they will then be managing development through development applications that they receive from government and from the private sector around changing land uses in their area. So the SDF is a very important plan and framework that we have as a country to help us guide the direction in which we want to go, which is what our MEC was talking about earlier. The process that we will follow as COGTA will be outlined in the upcoming speakers' presentations. It will probably take us in the region of 18 months to fully complete. We hope to do most of the work during the course of this year and complete it early next year, but they will outline how that happens. And the reason, I think the previous speakers have raised the importance of public participation. So the reasons behind why it is a process and not a quick a plan that is developed and it needs to go through a process is because we want to ensure proper consultation and give the public an opportunity to participate in the process of the development of the plan. For those of you who have time, I would recommend that you actually read the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act and familiarize yourselves with what it is that should guide a good quality spatial development framework. In the sections of the Act, you can refer to Section 4 of the Act to get specifics about the planning framework and about the development principles, which the MEC referred to as justice, resilience, sustainability, and efficiency. in the implementation of the Act. And in Chapter 5, you can also familiarize yourself with the mechanisms for land use schemes and what municipalities need to do to implement those in line with the SDFs, and the procedures. In Chapter 6 will give you the procedures for how development applications then follow. So I think the important part of the SDF is that it's one component of a set of plans and processes that have been put in place by the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act to guide where we go with land use and planning, and also to guide how development should happen in our province. So I'd like to end my brief input in this section today. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our Chief Director, Mrs. Lisa de Grande, for indicating to us why we have to do this process, giving us a legal context in terms of SPLUMA and the requirements for special development frameworks. Not only that, but also highlighting the linkages between the various special frameworks at a national, provincial, and local level, as well as their linkages to the various sector plans and the budgeting processes. She has indicated the fact that SPLUMA provides a background and requirements in terms of how we should be developing our special planning tools, more especially the special development framework, and has invited colleagues and participants to take time to read and familiarize themselves with SPLUMA requirements in terms of these processes, especially looking at Section 4, which it details the requirements for the framework, the principles, as well as the strategic requirements in terms of the special development framework. SPLUMA is our policy guide that guides land use as well as planning, but also helps us in providing the strategic guidance in terms of development and how that should be undertaken. We are therefore reviewing our Psdf as a province, strictly following on the principles and guidance in terms of SPLUMA, and we will be undertaking this process as an 18-month process. And it's gonna be a process that will need the members of the public and key stakeholders and sector departments to work hand in hand with us in the development and the review of this process, and ensure that your comments and your inputs are provided as we continue during this process. We are hopeful that we will undertake most of the work during the course of this financial year. And during this course, we will be contacting and engaging on an ongoing basis with our key stakeholders. And we will share with you the links in terms of how we will then continue to communicate with you as interested and affected parties. I will now be inviting the Chief Director from the Office of the Premier, Mrs. Metimil, who will then take us through the presentation for the review of the PGDS.
Good morning, Honourable MEC, Chairperson of the Commission, Deputy Chair, Commissioners, and everybody that is joining us this morning. I'm certainly not going to repeat what has been said in terms of the correlation between the PGDS and PSDF, but just very briefly take you through our process in terms of the review. So if we could ask our colleagues just to ensure that we have the presentation up. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I think the key issue to note is that, and what Lisa had also indicated, and the chairperson in his remarks, we are not starting at a zero base as KZN. KZN had started its process of a PGDS, or Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, in 2011. alongside with the processes unfolding with the National Planning Commission in developing the development and growth strategy. It is also not the first time that we are reviewing the document. The first review was completed in 2016. And as we go through the process, it is a reminder that our provincial growth and development strategy has a 20-year vision. And the 20-year vision is underpinned by a number of interventions that we seek to achieve over a period of time. And noting that this vision, the 20-year vision, is broken down into 5-year deliverables, and every 5 year, the provincial growth and development strategy is then reviewed. In terms of that review process, we have now started. In fact, some of the work has started last year, collecting and updating information on our situational analysis. And moving forward, we need to capitalize on this process, also noting that we are trying to shorten the timelines between our national processes and provincial alignment to our national imperatives as they come through the manifesto of the ruling party and the implementation and issues that our stakeholders are raising with us in terms of our provincial priorities. Moving forward then, some of the critical issues that will guide us in the process is really to solicit your help and inputs in terms of looking at what has worked in our previous iterations of the provincial growth and development strategy, what hasn't worked, and what do we need to change. Some of those things will require larger adjustments, and we will be indicating those when we give you feedback from this session moving forward and incorporating working with the Planning Commission and our action work groups to see how we can improve our provincial growth and development strategy. Some of the key issues that we know have come forward quite strongly now is the impact of COVID. At a national and provincial level, several recovery plans have been adopted, and we need to build those into our provincial growth and development strategy. Because as we know, this impact is not going to be something that we're just feeling now, but there is already some indications that for the next couple of years, there's a lot of things that we will have to do to make sure that our economy recovers, that our communities are safe, and that we improve the service delivery as much as we can. And those are the issues that we need to look at, as well as the consideration of new ways of doing things. Yes, it's becoming a little bit cliche, but the reality is it's definitely not going to be things being done the way it used to, and there's a new normal that we need to incorporate into our provincial growth and development strategy, not only just because of COVID, but because of the changes that COVID has highlighted and the interventions that it will bring forward. Then just to look at our process plan. Our process plan is a little bit shorter than the colleagues from the Spatial Development Framework. This does not mean that there's not alignment. We've seen a similar process unfold at the national level, where the medium-term strategic framework as the national strategy and implementation tool of the National Development Plan has been adopted before the Spatial Development Framework. And we will show a little bit later, and the team will touch on the issues of where and how the two fit together. Our chairperson has already given us a hint in terms of that process. But again, when we look at the starting point, our situational analysis, what is it that has worked? Where have we failed? And importantly, why? It might not be that we had the wrong plan or the wrong intervention, but there are different reasons why we were not able to succeed, and then to see how we need to develop responses that will be more effective than what they have been in the past. Another area to note is that planning in general, when it comes from the national guidelines, has seen a change in terminology to strengthen the impact-based approach, where we also look at an outcomes in terms of different interventions, not new in terms of terminology, but definitely in terms of the focus. And we see that coming through quite strongly in the medium-term strategic framework. So there is a little bit of readjustment that we need to do from the language that we are using. But what we also need to note is that this is not going to put us into a straitjacket. We do need to understand what is happening in KZN, get a sense from our stakeholders as to what those priorities and interventions need to be, so that we can leverage KZN specific interventions whilst also still working within our national priorities and imperatives. Part of this process links us to our stakeholders, which is the start of the process today. So starting with alerting you regarding the process as it's unfolding, the partnership with COCTA, and inviting you to bring some suggestions forward. And towards the end of today, the team will then show you the names and contact persons, but we will also invite you to visit the Planning Commission website at kznppc.gov.za for more information. But certainly we will be trying to share a lot of those engagement processes with the team from COCTA. In terms of the structure of the document for the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, you will see that there will be an outline in terms of the introduction and approach. We will be focusing on the strategic analysis, which ties to the situational review. We will be asking you also for some feedback in terms of the structure of the document, whether you are comfortable with it. But broadly, this is the approach that will be followed. Not very different from the past, but in terms of the key focus areas, also aligned to what has been happening at a national level. Looking at the strategic analysis, we really need to be guided here in terms of the sustainability matrix, which is very similar to what we have done in the past. It's not different or too different from any other strategic analysis tool that we're using, but because of the link to making sure that our deliveries are sustainable, we have opted for keeping the sustainability matrix. Looking at the environmental sustainability, our human development and social capital, economic development, infrastructure, the spatial development, that's our first link to our SDF, but then also the governance issues as a cross-cutter throughout the different sections. And we will be focusing in this section primarily on key challenges and new interventions, and be drawing conclusions from that that will feed into the next section of the strategic framework, to develop those workable solutions that we need. In terms of those inputs then, we will be guided very much by starting with our vision and asking ourselves, do we need to adjust our vision statement? If so, how and why? And so that it's not just adjusting for the sake of adjusting, but understanding the rationale for any amendments that are being proposed through the stakeholders. And our current vision, therefore, in terms of our 20-year vision, is to be a prosperous province with a healthy, secure and skilled population, living in dignity and harmony, acting as a gateway to Africa and the world. So we will be expecting and requesting some inputs and feedback on that process as well. From our vision statement then is to go into our national imperatives. National has given us 7 priorities. Our own provincial priorities do fit into these, but what we need to look at are an evidence-based approaches, focusing on the key challenges and interventions for each of the 7 national priorities, and also focusing in each priority on what they call cross-cutters. In the context of the national document, the vulnerable groups for women, youth and disabled, and within the KZN context, we also add the issues around our military veterans, which we need to look at when we are assessing our contributions towards ethical, capable developmental state, the issues of economic transformation, education and health as the 3rd priority, looking at our social wage and quality services, the issues of spatial integration, human settlements and local government, again, the link to the spatial development framework, how we support social cohesion and ensure that we have safe communities, and then as our gateway status, how we contribute to a better Africa and the world. Then taking us to the rest of the document and the link where we start with our spatial development framework. A lot of the work that is being done today and rolling out the spatial development framework will fit into this section. And the colleagues from COCTA will then be assisting us with their action work groups to focus on how we're going to improve our spatial development aspects within our current strategy. Whilst we are also working with colleagues from Public Works to look at our catalytic projects, we need to have an understanding of what we need to add, both in terms of the spatial framework and our catalytic projects, what we need to be removing, if so, and need to look at anything that is redundant and delete those as we move forward. And for that, it's not going to be a pen stroke. It's going to be based, again, on the feedback that we get from you as our stakeholders. The key issue then, when we look in terms of our link, is what our chairperson has indicated. Whilst the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy looks very much at the what and the plan that we put forward on an annual basis at the how, the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy also has to indicate where, and this is where the link comes from our spatial development framework. Very much in terms of approach, in the past, we have looked at the issues of environmental sustainability, the social needs, our economic potential, and accessibility. And part of the work starting today is then to reconsider whether we have still got the right places in terms of the development and our interventions. And with that, colleagues, I've come to the end of my section, and the chairperson, I will hand back to you in terms of the link to the spatial development framework and the spatial development framework team.
Thank you, Mrs. Mill, for such a good presentation on the aspect in terms of what we are expecting in the review of our PGDS and outlining the linkages between the PGDS review processes and that of the Psdf. Without really deliberating more, just a quick highlight of some of the issues that Mrs. Mill has indicated in as far as the review of the PGDS is concerned. There are some critical issues that have been highlighted in as far as the timeframes for the review are concerned. As indicated, the last review was done in 2016. We are now in the 5-year review in 2021. And as such, there are some critical guiding issues that are guiding the processes in terms of this particular review, mainly looking at what has worked and why it hasn't worked as part of reviewing the situational analysis, and also looking at the changes that are impacting upon the development within our province, more especially looking at some of the impacts that we are currently facing in terms of COVID-19, which requires us to look at some recovery plans and intervention strategies in how do we now look at improving services and also using the new normal in terms of doing things. It's not meant to straitjacket us, but it's meant to ensure that we improve in the way that we're doing things. There is a process plan that has been provided and alluded to us in terms of how the review process is going to unfold. And even though the process, as highlighted by Ms. Mill, is quite shorter than that of the Psdf, as you have seen the timeline that she has indicated that is starting today, but it's mostly to ensure as a way of indicating the current situational analysis and looking at the strategic challenges that are currently facing KZN, outlining some of the priorities.
Amanda, you have muted yourself.
Okay. Thank you. Apologies for that. The process is of stakeholder engagement is quite critical to ensure that we provide the necessary input and comments that will help us to guide the vision that we have in the province currently. And as such, through this process, we'll also outline whether we want to review or adjust our vision. If we are to adjust it, we need then to provide inputs in terms of how and what needs to change in terms of that vision. There's also a requirement that we align to ensure that we achieve the spatial cohesion and spatial transformation that is being highlighted at national level. In that regard, we are guided by the key challenges or the strategic areas that have been highlighted at the national level, including the cross-cutters areas, which include looking at issues affecting disabled women and the youth. But in our province, we've also added the areas impacting upon the military veterans. The PGDS is strongly linked to the Psdf in a sense that the PGDS highlights the where developments, the what development needs to happen in the province, and then the where it's where the SDF, Psdf come in, and that is where the link is. And currently, that review process, as indicated previously with other participants and stakeholders, that the role has been given to COCTA, and that close alignment has been achieved. And there is a dedicated chapter that has been highlighted in as far as the PGDS is concerned, where the review of the Psdf will be included. That is the summary of Mrs. Matty Milner's presentation. We'll now proceed and invite Mr. Sibongiseni Maseko to come and then give us the presentation on the Psdf review.
Chair, thank you very much. Greetings to the people of KwaZulu-Natal who are joining us through various platforms. Greetings to the Honorable MEC, the Chairperson of the Planning Commission, members of the Planning Commission, senior management of COCTA, my fellow panelists, and all others who have joined us in this particular occasion. Chair, my name is Sibongiseni Maseko. I work for a company called Isibuko Development Planners. I am joined for the purpose of this presentation by Petronel Human and Rian Thompson. Chair, we've been appointed to prepare the Provincial Special Development Framework for KwaZulu-Natal. This will be done in terms of this Spluma. And if you look at the Act itself, Chapter 4, Part A of this Spluma introduces the hierarchy of plans or of SDFs. So special development frameworks in terms of this Spluma have to be prepared for the national and for the provincial spheres of government and for regional areas and also for different municipalities. And what is emphasized in this, Chair, is about horizontal alignment of each one of these plans. And also that the SDF must present a, okay, sorry about that. The PSDF must present a special development vision and a program. And the most important part, taking from the presentation that was done just before me on the PGDS, it must provide for an efficient and sustainable execution of provincial executive powers that pertains to land development and land use. And therefore the alignment between the two documents is becoming very, very much important. And what we mean by this, Chair, is a specific arrangement for prioritization, mobilization of resources, and sequencing of the implementation of development programs. Therefore, it's important that the PSDF indicates quite clearly where exactly particular types of development should happen within the province, and also isolate those areas where development should not occur at all. What is also important here, Chair, is that the PSDF has to assist us in addressing a myriad of special issues and challenges that are facing KwaZulu-Natal. If one were to give an example and bring this much closer to home, we all heard of an unfortunate incident that happened in Bulwer recently, where a school kid was raped while walking 7 kilometers. These are some of the special anomalies where young kids are forced to walk long distances to access public facilities that such plans need to address. It's because of where we come from, and these are some of the challenges and anomalies that we need to address in our planning. I'm trying to bring it much closer to home to make more so that it becomes clearer for all of us. We can move to the next one. Why the PSDF, Chair? There are a number of reasons why we are preparing the PSDF. Firstly, it's because the Act says province has to prepare a special development framework. However, there are a number of other reasons why it's important for a province to have a PSDF. We come from a history of separate development, where areas of the former Natal are much more developed compared to the areas of KwaZulu. These are some of the issues that we need to address. We are having situations where access to opportunities and facilities is also different, moving depending on the areas where you are at. And these are some of the issues that we still also have to face. What is also important here is that since 1994, we have implemented a number of policies, as the government has implemented a number of policies, which have had different types of impacts as well. For instance, we were hoping that we will see more of compact development, more of densification. What we have seen is a continuation of urban sprawl. And these are the issues why we need this particular SDF, so that we can create and formulate a new KZN and mobilize stakeholders, participants, our leaders, youth, women, everybody in coming up with a vision for a future KZN that is democratic, that enables an equitable access to opportunities and public facilities. This particular vision will become a policy and will be of legal effect as soon as it is approved by the executive. We therefore invite all people of KwaZulu-Natal, more than 11 million of them, to participate in a process of coming up with a vision for a future KwaZulu-Natal, as it will be expressed in the Provincial Special Development Framework. The content of the PSDF, Chair, is outlined in section 16 of this Pluma. I'm not going to spend much time on this one, because we all know, we have heard that it's about a spatial representation. We have heard that it's about a desired future land use pattern. We have heard that we need to coordinate with the provincial plans, other provincial plans. We also need to align all the provincial plans and also align horizontally and vertically. This means that we need to provide a coordinating framework for the preparation of municipal spatial development frameworks, and at the same time coordinate across municipalities. For instance, you have municipalities that are sharing a boundary, and you find that their SDFs are not aligned. One is saying something else and another one is saying the other. Within this particular framework, that should be avoided, and we need to make sure that there is seamless, there is integrated, there is continuous and harmonious land use within the province. And more details on the content of the SDFs, Chair, including the PSDF, are provided in section 12 of this Pluma, and it indicates exactly what issues needs to be considered. And these are the issues that we will take into account as we prepare this Provincial Special Development Framework. The country, Chair, has adopted a principle-based approach to planning. And as such, the Pluma outlines about 5 principles that will be used to guide planning at a provincial level. Can you move to the next slide, please? Hello? Okay. There are 5 guiding principles, that is spatial efficiency, spatial justice, spatial sustainability, spatial resilience, and good governance. While these will be used to guide the process, the planning process, they are also an indicator of the South Africa that we want to create. What we want to see is a functional spatial functional spaces. I'm talking here of regional spaces. I'm talking here of urban areas. I'm talking about towns where there is a greater integration in terms of land use, in terms of spatial patterns, and also in terms of linkages between different areas. Much more stronger linkages between your rural and your urban areas, and much more stronger linkages between your residential and your non-residential areas. We are also talking about issues of spatial justice. This is about equitable access to public facilities, to basic services, and most importantly, Chair, to opportunities, taking into account the unfortunate history that I mentioned earlier on. Spatial sustainability is more about issues of environment and managing development such that it doesn't cause any harm to the natural environment. You will remember, as the current generation, we have a challenge of making sure that we look after the environment and use it to meet our own needs in a manner that doesn't compromise future generations' ability to meet their own needs. So that is a very, very much important principle. And also that everything that we do, be it economic development initiatives, be it social development initiatives, and any others, Chair, they all happen within an environment. Spatial resilience, Chair, is about the ability of the province, settlements within the province. I'm talking again about urban, rural, and rural settlements. I'm talking about formal and informal settlements. They must be able to withstand any shocks. They must be able to absorb any shocks that nature may throw at us. I'm talking here about global warming. I'm talking here about the scourge of the coronavirus that we are experiencing at present. Our settlements must be such that we are able to respond positively and effectively in all of these challenges. As we do this, we need to make sure that we maintain good governance. I'm talking here about enforcement of the plans that we put together. Since this will be a provincial policy, it is also incumbent upon the provincial executive to make sure that all government departments, all municipalities, all organs of state within the province operate within the framework of the provincial spatial development framework. And therefore, issues of enforcement become very much critical. You will remember I indicated earlier on that SDFs will also be prepared for local spheres of government. And therefore, it is also important for province to ensure that those particular SDFs within the provincial framework are also enforced. The process that will be followed, Chair, is a simple, straightforward planning process. We have dispensed with the inception phase. And we are currently working on policy, vision, directives, spatial challenges, and opportunities. Here, Chair, we have collected a great deal of information thanks to various stakeholders who have cooperated with us. We are currently analyzing this information, and we will be formulating different scenarios for the province, exploring those different scenarios and coming up with a consolidated vision for the province. Again, this is not just going to be a desktop exercise. This particular initiative is a start of a long process of stakeholder engagement, whereby we will be analyzing data together, whereby we will be getting input on options, exploring different strategies, and making choices for the province in this regard. So there will be a vision statement as a result or as an output of this particular phase. We will then be moving to phase 3, whereby we will be looking at spatial proposals, implementation framework, and so on. This, Chair, becomes a bridge across an abyss. If global warming is throwing us into an abyss, if coronavirus is throwing us into some form of spatial abyss, this then becomes our bridge across. because we then have to be very clear on what is it that we will do to achieve the vision that we will have formulated. We need to identify and develop smart strategies that will be able to be monitored and be evaluated on an ongoing basis. A clear identification of spatial indicators and spatial targets becomes very important in this regard. We will be developing various monitoring and evaluation tools to ensure that we continuously monitor our spatial interventions, and we are able to ensure that they create and they generate the impact that we would have planned. It does become important, Chair, that these are integrated into the capital investment framework, which clearly indicates and answers the question that Martin Milner was talking about. Where are we doing what from a spatial perspective? This is then an indication where we take all the catalytic projects, be they private sector investments, be they public sector investments, and we indicate and depict them spatially so that we are able to see where we are making changes from a spatial point of view. We are well aware that you cannot undo years of injustice. There are areas that are underdeveloped at present, and there are pressures to make sure that those areas are uplifted from poverty. We bring job opportunities through plans of this nature to such areas. We improve access to public facilities and basic services through plans of this nature. However, it cannot all happen at once at the same place. We have to make sure that we identify and focus on strategic areas for investment, strategic areas for intervention. Some of these will be areas that are poverty-stricken, where we need to create those opportunities and add some of those opportunities and enable the public and private sectors to absorb and also engage with those opportunities. We will then, Chair, be consolidating all of that into a draft spatial development framework, which will be taken through an intensive and extensive public participation process during the 4th phase of the process. This is very, very much important because while stakeholders would have engaged with us from inception of the project to a point where we have a draft spatial development framework, we will then be afforded as the people of KwaZulu-Natal, as the interested and affected parties in the KwaZulu-Natal spatial system, to engage again with the draft Psdf. At this stage, we may decide that we want to deconstruct whatever vision that we would have formulated. However, if we do so, we invite all stakeholders, all participants to help us to put the pieces together so that we emerge with a common and a shared vision for KwaZulu-Natal, the KwaZulu-Natal that we want, the KwaZulu-Natal that we deserve. That is the plan that will then be, or the inputs from the members of the public will then be consolidated into a final Psdf, which will be taken to Cabinet for approval and gazetting. And at that stage, it will then become policy of government. The document will be structured as indicated in the slide here. Well, this is just an indication, it's not the chapters, it's basically the sections of the document. As we have indicated earlier on, there will be a policy context and vision directives. This will be based on an extensive analysis of existing policies at a national level, and also protocols that South Africa had signed at an international level, and other concerns that are important in this regard. It will be summarized and then be consolidated into a vision. This again, as I've indicated earlier on, it will be based on extensive stakeholder input. Then there will be special challenges and opportunities. We will analyze trends, patterns, identify opportunities, and all aspects of the built environment, Chair, will be analyzed and considered and presented in the form of a status quo report, but most importantly, in the form of issues and challenges and opportunities that province would need to take advantage of so that we achieve the future we want. The trends and patterns that we want to redirect or that we want to reinforce. We will also be looking at issues that are cross-cutting. Others were mentioned in the earlier presentation. Special proposals, I think I've covered these ones extensively. The issues of objectives, it's got to be smart objectives. we've got to be able to measure everything that we do, all the interventions that we introduce from a spatial perspective. So it is important that this becomes a smart plan. And again, we will be working within the framework of the PGDS in some of the measurement systems, and also in terms of measuring the targets and so on. And then the implementation framework will include provincial special policies. It will include special development guidelines, a capital investment framework, and most importantly, Chair, it needs to indicate how exactly this plan will be implemented, who will be responsible for what, though the institutional arrangements become quite critical. As much as this plan will be adopted within a period of 18 months and also then be reviewed after 5 years, it is very much important that stakeholders continue to be involved, not only in the planning process, but also in making some of the decisions in terms of the implementation. The last one, Chair, will be a consolidated Sdf, which will be in line with the provisions of this PLUMA, and again be a component of the PGDS. I will invite Rian Thompson to deal with issues of stakeholder engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Maseko. Amanda, can you just keep the slide up again? There we go. Thank you. Honorable MEC, PPC Chair, Deputy Chair, the Commissioners and Senior Management from COCTA, as well as our panelists here, thank you for this opportunity. Just to touch on what Mr. Maseko was saying, and I actually want to start back with what Mrs. Del Grande was saying, this entire PSDF process is a process, and as such, its outcomes are determined by the inputs of very many role players throughout the process itself. And that actually starts right now. Although a lot of these strategic processes have got engagement with role players and especially the public towards the end, presenting to them what has been conjured up and thought up in terms of solutions, this particular PSDF, in conjunction with the PGDS, will start its engagements almost immediately. And you'll see in a minute or two's time, following from today, a couple of webinars in the next 2 weeks, as have been mentioned. What is important, though, is that engagement approach is structured. Initially, when this process started and just before COVID lockdown hit our country, we were intending to have individual physical meetings, probably full-day workshops, etc. Because we have to move online, it was decided that we will follow the same sustainability matrix to group certain themes and certain role players in our discussions. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to start having a few sector-based workshops right now. And the idea is to start identifying the problem statement, to start solidifying some of these issues that we know about, but wanting to find out more in terms of their where, in terms of to which extent they are being experienced. And we would like to then hold these webinars on those themes. And as you indicate on the slide there, we'll start with a social webinar dealing with issues of population growth, migration, etc. I did note one of the questions by Mr. Ramnath on the chat group indicated the link between Census 2021 and the information that we are gathering at the moment. And it is one of the key things in the province is the fact that we need to try and get consistent both population as well as migration data and information to plan on. And we'll touch on that in a minute's time. We'll be looking at an economic webinar or economic sector discussion regarding the economic trends within the province, economic opportunities, and also linking it to resource reform, land reform, etc. Looking at environmental issues within a webinar on the environmental growth and development of the province. They will look at, again, land capability, ecosystems, etc. We'll move on to the infrastructure webinar, mainly dealing with the issues that came out of the Provincial Infrastructure Master Plan, but linking it back to the PSDF as well as the PGDS requirements. And as was indicated by Mrs. Milne earlier, is governance will have a complete separate webinar as well, even though it is a cross-cutting issue in all of these. it was felt that it's important to talk about governance and how governance in terms of the spatial planning system and the integration of our spatial planning system affects all of these. And you'll see right in the middle there, GIS, because this is a spatial and the where of the PGDS, we will also have a separate GIS forum consistently with various departments and the GIS representatives to make sure that the data used is applicable, it's the most up-to-date, and can be shared as far as possible. Thank you, Amanda. Next slide. In terms of some of the role players, it is difficult, even with electronic platforms, to invite everybody to absolutely every single meeting, although COCTA has tried to invite as many people as possible. What is important for us, though, is at these webinars being planned, that a couple of the key departments, both nationally and provincially, such as the Department of Education, Department of Social Development, Department of Health, are included in, for instance, the social webinar, which will start tomorrow already, as well as some of the developmental partners, such as SASA, some of the SOEs, etc. And we've identified for each of these sectoral webinars a core set of role players that are on a daily basis involved in the implementation of the PGDS as well as the Psdf. But it's not just limited to the role players that you see on the screen there at the moment. The same role players that will be invited today, if you do not receive a direct invitation, and I'll repeat this at the end as well, please do email COCTA. Will provide that email address to you and indicate, I would like to attend a specific webinar, and we'll send you an invite to that as well. What is important with these webinars, however, is these role players are invited because we would like to pick their brains. We would like to get an idea of how far implementation has come. That's been mentioned before, and it's been mentioned on the chat group as well, that we take stock of what has worked, what hasn't worked. We're also going to ask these role players what sort of issues are critical at the moment within their opinion that we should address as part of the PGDS. Thank you, Amanda. Next one. Now, at these particular sectoral webinars, we are envisaging a 2-hour session in the next 2 weeks, and we'll provide the dates to you now. And in that particular webinar, and we present this so that those of you who are interested in the sector would understand what is being discussed and whether or not yourself or one of your colleagues from the organization you are representing should be present at these particular webinars. We'll obviously provide a brief background. Now, we deliberately had this intro session today so that we don't have to spend a lot of time explaining the background to both the PGDS and the Psdf in these sectoral webinars. We'll do it briefly and then move on to the actual discussion itself. We will set the tone with regards to not only the SPLUMA principles, which has been mentioned by Mrs. Dalgrande and also highlighted earlier by Mr. Maseko, but we'll also highlight per sector directives from other international and national and provincial policies which already exist. And that sort of just sets the tone so that everybody at the webinar understands what we are focusing on and what we are trying to achieve. We will then present a few known challenges. As part of the process, we have started with the status quo analysis, an analysis and mapping of certain issues which are already known from a social perspective, economic perspective, infrastructure, etc. And we'll present that very briefly. So it's not necessarily a presentation of the status quo findings, but a presentation of the first understanding that we have received in terms of the province itself. And what's very important is we are asking the role players at these sector departments representing some of the social and economic and infrastructure environmental partnerships in the province to ground truth this for us, to indicate to us whether or not that data is accurate, to indicate if there's any additional data sources that we should be referred to, which is important to us. And also that assists us in listing the final challenges that we need to address. At this stage, I want to say that these webinars are gaining inputs not only for the Psdf, they're also gaining inputs directly for the PGDS, because a lot of our development challenges has got a spatial component, but some of them might not, and the answer or the solution might be more structural. So we are looking a little bit wider than just spatial issues. From those identified issues, we will start asking questions about drivers of change. In other words, how can we affect change? What's the key elements that needs to be addressed? You cannot just head straight on and say we need to solve a problem without understanding what causes that problem. So we will dig a little bit deeper. And then for the last part of the webinars, we'll be asking questions about anticipated outcomes. What is the vision? What is the solutions that might already be existing? Now, 2 hours is not a long time, so we will not necessarily be able to gather all of this information. So what we'll be doing during the webinar, for all of those who attend and all of those who have registered for today, we will also email a brief questionnaire per sector. So that questionnaire will ask the same questions that we'll be asking within the webinar. It'll ask about role players that we might not have identified yet, data sources, policy documents, etc., which you feel we need to take cognizance of, and then as well as ground truthing these challenges and potential solutions. So if you cannot attend these webinars, and also there's a capacity issue with the platform we are using, please be assured that we would like to get your inputs through those webinars. Amanda, can I just move on to the next slide before we get back to questions and answers, maybe from your side? And the next one. Thank you. These webinars we are referring to, the first one is obviously today. There's a second one, the social sector, will be held tomorrow. Those invites have already been sent out by COCTA to individuals, core individuals. And as I've indicated, if you would like to attend that webinar or any of the other webinars and you haven't received your email invite yet, please indicate that to us in the email, which I'll show you in a minute's time, and we will make sure that you get an invite to that. Be aware, the platform is limited to 100 participants at the moment. And unfortunately, if you are under 150 or so and you cannot be entered, we will let you know at least, and we would ask you to provide your inputs via the questionnaire. The economic session will be held on Friday. Those invitations are also going out during the course of today. The environmental session will be held on the 21st. That's next week, Tuesday. Next week, Wednesday, is the infrastructure sector plan or sector webinar. The Thursday is governance, the cross-cutting issue. And very importantly on this slide, as soon as we have gathered issues and identified the issues and potential outcomes from these sector webinars, we will have a much broader section with all the role players in terms of municipalities. There'll probably be invites going out to the public as well at that stage, simply to present the highlighted issues that we have identified. And if the technology cooperates with us on that particular session, we'll also use an online voting or ranking tool that allows all role players to indicate from the 12 or 15 issues on social, economic, environmental we've highlighted, what do those role players and partners feel are the most important things or the most significant solutions. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, that's only the beginning of our participation. With all subsequent phases, we will have similar webinars. We'll engage different role players to make sure that this is a process with inputs from everybody coming out. And then maybe just lastly, before I hand back to the chair, if you do have an interest, if you do want to make a comment, if you do want to register for any of these webinars, please, there are contact details on the screen at the moment. If you would like to register for these sectoral webinars, if you don't receive an invite, you can email psdf@kzncocta.gov.za or phone either Mr. Zungu or Mr. Mhlongo as indicated over there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson and Mr. Sibongiseni Masego for the presentation and guidance in terms of what will follow in terms of the following webinars. Just a quick summary on Mr. Sibongiseni's presentation. He alluded to the fact that we are doing this within the aspect of the legislation, which is PLUMA, and he highlighted the various sections within the Act which guide the development of PSDFs. He has also highlighted the fact that we are doing this as part of a program which is structured, and it's an 18-month process and is closely aligned to the PGDS. And he has indicated the fact that in terms of our program, we have now concluded the inception phase. We are now in the second phase, which will complete at the end of September, where we are looking at our policy directives and vision directives. And with regards to that, we have completed all the necessary requirements for the policy narratives, looking at the various policy directives from a national level as well as international aspect. We are currently looking at the vision imperatives, and this is where we require a lot of intervention and comments from our key stakeholders. In this regard, he has also indicated that following from that process, we'll then move into looking at our special challenges and opportunities, where we will highlight the various areas in terms of integrating the various aspects in terms of the policy, but looking directly at the various impacts in terms of the province, looking at areas where we are hardest hit in terms of your impacts, such as COVID-19, poverty, and the likes. And moving along, we'll then develop a very smart proposal or strategy that will address how we want to address those various issues. And then looking at the next phase, which would be the implementation phase, which will incorporate the various aspects in terms of a capital investment framework and your institutional arrangements that will ensure that whatever plans that we put in place are capable for being implemented, and there would be a monitoring and evaluation of the plans that we do. In all this, what will then lead into a process of us finalizing a draft that will require the various stakeholders to input and comment, and the stakeholder engagement is very much critical. And what the colleagues have stressed is the fact that prior to COVID-19, we were expecting to have a big mama of an intervention in terms of stakeholder engagement, where we're going to have a big public participation forum and workshop, a full day workshop. But because now we are in the COVID-19 stage, we then have to use the smart approach of virtual meetings. We have also planned a number of follow-up webinars, as Mr. Ryan Thompson has highlighted, starting tomorrow, where we'll be looking at various themes from your social, which is tomorrow, economic, which is on Friday, and infrastructure and governance following on the following week. And then we'll round up with a webinar where we'll then be looking at what is it that we have consolidated, what are some of the aspects, and noting the fact that we are limited on the platforms. We'll also be sending out questionnaires so that we can have input forwarded to us as part of those targeted workshops. And we plead that colleagues and participants and stakeholders do avail themselves and do provide the necessary comments. A website has been alluded to in terms of the KZN is www.kzncogta.gov/PSDF, where we'll be posting most of the documents and the products during the course of the process. You can also get into contact with us by emailing us if you have not received the invite, as invite has already been sent out for tomorrow's webinar. You can then email us on psdf@kzncogta.gov.za. You can also be in contact with us via the telephone. You can phone in as well. I think that sort of rounds off the presentations that we were expecting for the day. We are now moving into the question and answer session. I will then call upon a colleague of mine from COCTA, Mr. Rushton, who will lead us in the comments and questioning phase, and the panelists to then come on board and respond accordingly. Mr. Rushton.
Good day, everyone. Hi. Okay, let's just jump into it straight away. One of the first comments was made on we really need to maybe look back and see where have we come from, what has happened so far in transformation. Nokwanda Malinga raised this. What is the progress with spatial transformation, let's say in townships, in the rural areas? What is the degree of change? How is accessibility to social services, to economic opportunities happening in priority and disadvantaged areas? Amanda, I'll leave you to direct or see which panel member is going to try and address that. There have been a couple of written comments given along the way. So I won't capture those. I'll just raise the questions.
Okay, Mr. Rushton, if you can give us maybe a round of 5 questions.
5 questions.
And then
okay.
I'll give guidance in terms of who would address those questions for us.
Let me pick up on one that was that seemed to crop up quite often is, let's say, the role of the district development model, the district development or district growth and development plans, the PGDS, the PGDP, and the Psdf, and how they all relate to each other. And I think it has some legal bearing, but I think it's broader than that. So that's the other common theme that came up. Let me have a look at. Then there was the theme of how far are we with a wall-to-wall strategies, and whether this is actually scheme related or it's actually broader. How are we finding that let's say that the interlinks between the urban and the rural happening at a far more successful rate than we're seeing is one. Then food security was raised as a very important issue to address, and I think it's something that needs to be raised as well. One of the other questions that came up was, I think, along the lines of, we really do need to have sharper indicators. So we can do these plans, and if we're not monitoring and evaluating things properly, and the indicators are poor, we're not really going to see where the problems are. We're into change management, and so we have to get to a point where we are understanding exactly what are the real issues that are happening, what is changing and what's not changing. So if we're doing all this investment, we're doing all these interventions, what is actually, is it helping? Is it taking us forward? So there was a call by Ms. Mbata to say, look, sharper indicators are really needed on a lot of things. And then I get the impression that there was also a touch on the importance of population and understanding population movements and trends. And then shortly after that, I think Alka came up with the issue of, okay, how are we going to consolidate between the census of 2021 and the development of the spatial development framework, and noting that this is a process. Let me just scroll through. And then I think Delani Kanile raised one of another issues is we have so many districts in KZN. What do? We have so many municipalities, so many districts compared to everybody else. Does this process consider maybe amending, changing, reviewing that approach? And then the last one, I think, was Neela Naidu, and I'll stop at that, is education facilities needed alongside housing developments, and starting to really get to integration of social facilities In fact, the integration of multiple themes of economic, social, of governance need to take place. And I think through the process, and you've listened to all the webinars that are going to happen, we're going to try and see how we integrate all these themes. Thank you.
Let me indicate that we'll then ask Mrs. Lisa De Grande to assist us with the aspect with regards to what is the aspect in terms of aligning. I think there was a question also that you alluded to. You mentioned half of it from Delani in terms of the districts. He also mentioned what is the alignment between the DDM and the Psdf. So that aspect, I'll ask Mrs. Lisa De Grande to just highlight what is the approach in terms of the DDM and how is it aligned to the Psdf. Mr. Sbongiseni Masego, if you can address the two questions on one, the population movement and the incorporation of census information and trends in the Psdf, how are we going to address that? Secondly, the aspect with regards to the alignment or the need to align the education facilities alongside the housing developments. Mrs. Milner, if you can assist us with the questions of smart indicators in the developments, and to say that how are we going to ensure that the plannings that we're doing is not just merely plans, but in terms of implementation will be critical in ensuring that we achieve the desired outcomes and impacts. And I will assist with the, lastly, I'll come in and address the issue of achieving the wall-to-wall strategy development in terms of rural and urban, being assisted by Mrs. Zungu, if she can be able to come through. Thanks. Mrs. De Grande.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's a very important question that was asked, and I think perhaps in our presentations we didn't highlight those enough, that issue enough, or speak to it, especially because the district development model approach is an approach that all of government has now adopted, and it was something that was announced by our president a year ago, and all the provinces and districts have started to implement them. I think I just want to emphasize that the DDM is an IGR approach, and it's an attempt to address the fact that our existing legislative plans, like the IDPs and the SDFs, have not resulted in the level of coordination and integration that we would have expected. And that lack of coordination and integration has also affected our ability to make the kind of impact on spatial equity and spatial issues and development. And so we mustn't necessarily see the DDM as another layer, but rather see the DDM as a renewed IGR approach, an effort to push all of government to account, to plan, and to implement and to monitor at a district level. And in other words, closer to the local sphere of government, and to try to improve the way or the content or the coordination and collaboration that should be taking place in the IDPs and the SDF processes. So it doesn't replace those plans. Those are legislative plans, but it's a mechanism that we are putting in place at district and metro levels to ensure that we get better quality plans, better integrated implementation, and better outcomes, and that we are accountable as all of government at that district level. And this means that we not only are going to be looking at the and drawing from the existing IDPs and SDFs, so they become very important documents that we focus on and improve, but we're going to develop what we're calling a one plan at that district level. It's not a new plan, it's not a new layer of plans, it's simply a way in which we want to monitor and coordinate the sector departments' plans with the IDPs and with the SDFs and the visions across the three spheres. And the one plan will really be a plan that draws on all of the existing plans to say, have we got it right or have we not got it right at that level? And so in KZN, we've already started this process of profiling all the districts, all the plans that exist there, and starting to assess and analyze how aligned and how integrated they are and where the gaps and weaknesses are. And we've also started to establish institutional RGR structures that incorporate all of government, national, province, and the municipal level representation in district structures, which we're calling DDM, technical and political structures at that level, so that government becomes accountable. I've focused a lot on government, but I think it's also to remind us that our plans should also be informed by citizens, not just by government staff members. And so pushing it down to that level also means that we are integrating it with what the OSS approach that we already have in KZN, which works all the way down to the ward level, where we have war rooms and citizens issues are supposed to be raised at that level and elevated into our plans. So we would also like to use the DDM approach to push for that level of participation and responsiveness to citizens. And therefore we are going to now be operating our planning and our coordination at the district level. So I'm hoping I've explained the relationship between our existing legislative plans like the SDFs and the IDPs with the DDM approach, and that people can understand how they can participate and support that approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Mrs. De Grande. Can I then ask the OTP colleagues to assist us with the question on the indicators?
Hi, colleagues, can you hear me?
Yes, Matty, we can hear you. Would also like to see you. Thank you.
I'm trying to get that to work, but for today, I'm being sabotaged with technology.
Okay.
Okay. On the issue of indicators, I'm not going to go into the whole philosophy of indicator development. Amanda, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'll just, okay, thank you.
Right. I'm not going to go into the theoretical background to this because, but I will invite colleagues just to familiarize themselves with the new planning frameworks that's used in government. And the issue of smart indicators is something that they will tell you is not the criteria for indicators. But a reminder also that we don't start with the indicator in mind. We start with the result we want to see. And then we will have to define how we're going to measure that particular result at different levels. So we agree we need to improve indicators, but we do need to understand that the inputs and the products and things that we do need to yield the desired result in the KZN context. And once we are certain that we have clearly defined that desired result, we can then start looking at the measurement instrument, the indicators that we want to put towards them. So I just want to caution that it's not just about deciding or thumb-sucking a set of matrices that's going to show us whether we have achieved. We actually have to define what we call a theory of change, that process of what it is, the desired result we want to see, and how we can reflect that. The other issue we need to be mindful of is the cost of measurement. If our indicators are not cost effective and we try and measure everything we're trying to see out there, or would like to measure everything, then it's also becoming counterproductive. So there needs to be a balance in the approach as to what it is we want to measure. And that will be part of the M&E framework that is incorporated in the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy. And we will welcome inputs into that process as well. So as we unfold, some of those indicators will be required for us, whether we like it or not, to report against at a national level because of the alignment processes. When we start talking at a local level, remember this is a provincial strategy. So the local level indicators is something that we need to look at very closely when our municipalities craft their ward-based plans, as well as that feeding into the integrated development plans and the district plans. So the local level indicators will, by and large, be as a result of what the localized planning interventions have yielded in terms of our measurements. But we also agree that it's not about having many indicators, it's about selecting the ones that are going to reflect best that desired result that we would want to see. We would welcome inputs and suggestions as we move towards that, but we will also call upon our colleagues at the local level to start looking at how they can start collecting data more effectively so that that information can crystallize into a very reliable source that will improve our measurements as we move through the different spheres and layers of planning that is prevalent. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Mrs. Milne. Can I ask Mr. Sibongiseni to come in and address the issues around the population movement trends and census, as well as the alignment of facilities or along our housing developments?
Hello, Chair. Chair, it says I can't start my video because the host has stopped it. If you can please look at that for me. Chair, there were two questions that I was asked to respond to. One relates to population movement. The second one relates to education and housing. And then there is one that relates to the issue of data. Chair, let me first indicate that we are using data from different sources. We are lucky in the sense that the NSDF is ahead of us and there is already a draft in place, and we are using some of the information that was collected as part of that. And in addition to that, the CSIR has done extensive work on modeling settlements, population movement throughout the country, and that data is also available for us, and we are making use of it. We are not in any way ignoring data from Stats SA. We are using that as well, bearing in mind that the data from Stats SA will probably be, especially the census data, will be the 2011, and they are only doing preparations now for the forthcoming census. It's very much likely that that information, the new census data, will not be available by the time we finalize the Psdf. As part of using that data, Chair, we are identifying population movement patterns and trends. And through the webinars that will be coming and further engagement with members of the public and the people of KwaZulu-Natal, we will then be identifying those trends that we want to enforce or that we want to support, that we want to continue and to support and reinforce, if one can put it that way. We will also be identifying those trends that we want to redirect. We do need to bear in mind that there are areas that are experiencing high population growth. There are also areas that are experiencing loss of population, where people are moving to other areas. You have areas along the coast that are under pressure at the moment, but we will be exploring all of this information in more detail. If participants or if the interested and affected parties can alert us to any other credible sources of data that we can use to kind of analyze these trends and patterns, and also to remodel KwaZulu-Natal, that will be highly appreciated. Chair, on the second one, we believe that the Psdf, like any other SDF, it's about human settlement and the associated land uses. It's where do people locate and where do they engage in various activities that supports their livelihoods. What then becomes important here is that the KZN we want is the KZN where indeed you do not have to walk 7 kilometers to access a school. It's a KZN where you do not have to commute a long distance to access employment opportunities. It's a KZN where some of these opportunities are within a walking distance or are within a short traveling distance. However, there are realities that we do need to bear in mind. Realities that we inherited from the colonial and the apartheid past. The reality is, Umlazi is where it is, and it's not going to move at any time, even if you look at it in relation to the CBD of eThekwini. The reality then, or the strategies then that we need to adopt are those that says, what is it that causes movement of people from such areas to where they can access opportunities? Is there any way in which we can transform some of these existing settlements from being just mere townships into functional, sustainable human settlements that generate various opportunities for different people? That would also include issues of access. In this regard, Chair, the Spluma principles become very, very much important and critical, especially the one that talks to spatial functionality or spatial efficiency, if one can put it that way, and also the one that talks to spatial justice. The first one, Chair, which is spatial efficiency or spatial efficiency, talks to issues of movement. People should not move. People should not incur unnecessary cost moving from one area to the other in order to access opportunities and facilities. We need to reduce that. The second one is then about access. We need to improve equitable access to facilities, to opportunities, and so on. So the issue of housing and education can also be looked as part of that, or will be considering it as part of that. We need to make sure that our human settlements are functional and they work for the people that reside in those settlements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Masego. Can I ask Mrs. Zungu if she is able to address the last question on the wall-to-wall incorporation of rural areas with special reference to wall-to-wall schemes?
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Amanda, and good day to all. Just a response is that with the SDF, we're going to be looking at the provincial level and taking into account the provincial context, including the special challenges that are experienced with the rural nature of the landscape. However, with regards to wall-to-wall land use schemes, we've got municipalities that are responsible to prepare the schemes, and we've got 43 municipalities in the province, plus Metro, that are required to prepare land use schemes. To date, we have about 23 municipalities that have adopted wall-to-wall schemes as at end of June. But with that said, they need to really look into the fine grain of the land use schemes that have been prepared to check their developmental nature and if they are really looking into the current issues that are experienced in rural areas, because we never had land use schemes prepared over the rural areas. And now we need to ensure that the land use schemes are incremental. They are just introducing incremental provisions for land use scheme management. They're not necessarily urban biased or turning the rural areas into urban spaces, but they are developmental and encouraging development in a manner that is appreciating the nature and the character of rural areas. So we are, as a department, assisting municipalities to prepare their land use schemes, and we've already acknowledged the need that beyond the compliance nature of our monitoring, we need to also ensure that these land use schemes are useful and they're helping the communities. So all in all, at the level of provincial SDF, we'll be looking at high-level indicators, but the more fine-grained input and planning is required at the local level, at municipal level, where we are assisting and we want to see the impact. Thank you very much.
Zungu, thank you so much for addressing that question. Mr. Rushton has just a few more questions along the DDM process and the DGDP process. Maybe if you can give us those as the last round of questions, and we can ask Mrs. Mina to address the one on the alignments between the PGDS, DDM, and DGDP, and the one for the DDM, Mrs. De Grande will attend to those. Thank you. Mr. Rushton.
Okay, you might just have to listen to my voice. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can see you and hear you,
okay.
Mr. Rushton.
Okay. I think one question that came up again was the issue of conflicting legislation. There needs to be a resolution or solving that, and maybe that relates also to some of the plans that we have. There's all let's say different types of plans, and I don't want to raise the DDM thing again, but maybe, and hopefully Marty and team will talk to maybe just their view from the Commission side, how they envisage these plans fitting into each other. Then I'm looking at Sipamandla Mzela raised a number of issues from rural development, and I think I'm going to just pick up one of the issues is one of climate change and global warming, how we address that in the plan. And I think let's probably end off on something that's very topical is the issue of COVID. How that's a big question. How is COVID going to make us stand differently, respond differently, and in the best way possible? I think that's as much as I can remember and recall. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rushton. I will call upon the other members of the panel to also, once Mrs. De Grande and Mrs. Milne has attended to those questions, to also maybe indicate by a show of hand if they would also want to add on any of the issues that have been addressed. So I will then allow for that to happen as we are rounding off the question and answer session. Can I ask Mrs. De Grande to attend to the issues of DDM and conflicting legislation, Mrs. Milne, and climate change issues and COVID-19, if Mr. Masego can come in, and then after which, if any member of the of the commission also want to add, I mean, including our honorable MEC, if they also want to add on any of the issues that were raised and provide input, they are welcome to do that after those three panelists. Thank you.
Thanks again, Amanda. I'm not going to repeat what I said previously around the DDM. I think maybe just to add to what I had said, one of the things that we have noted is the confusion around the layers of plans, not just confusion, but sometimes we end up just simply, especially at a municipal level, because everything ends up there. And the requirements grow exponentially for them, and they also have limited resources. And is that we have a range of plans that that need to be done, and each plan seems to take on a life of its own. This is what we've noticed, and have its own costs associated with it, which has become seriously problematic, because if we look at what the intention is of SPLUMA, it is to try and get a coherent planning system going in the country that applies uniformly across all three spheres of government. And so we don't have all these layers of different plans potentially saying different things and going in different directions. So we have noted that at a provincial level, and we have an action working group which is focusing on issues of spatial equity, where we have a range of sector departments participating and other stakeholders. And one of the issues that we've discussed there is how we can review this suite of plans and try and streamline them more, so that there isn't this unnecessarily layers of plans, and where we can integrate planning processes, we try to integrate them. Because I think the other practical outcome of this process is that municipalities are then trying to find money to implement each of these plans, which in the end often have a lot of repetition across them. So we are in the process of doing a review of that at a provincial level, and we will be having discussions with municipalities about what our suggestions are. Inside that discussion is a discussion about the district growth and development plans that were instituted. Remember, these things were put in place before we had the DDM approach, and before SPLUMA, almost at the same time, before SPLUMA and spatial development frameworks in terms of SPLUMA really took off. So there has been acknowledgement that we probably need to go and revisit, not necessarily to do away with the district growth and development plan, but to look at integrating aspects so that we reduce the cost and we ensure a level of integration and coordination across the plans. Linked to that is a discussion about conflicting legislation. And I think the way that plays out is that when a private developer, or even sometimes ourselves as government, are trying to develop land in certain areas, we're having to go to a number of different departments to get permission. For example, if it's on agricultural land, you have to get the national minister to agree to release the land. You have to get the environmental minister to agree to the environmental impact that the land might have. So that's another process. Then you have to go sometimes to the Department of Transport if it's near a road and get another approval. And then you have to go to the municipality. It's a very costly, it's a very time-consuming exercise. But what SPLUMA does allow us to do, which is something we haven't explored enough, and we are discussing it in the province, is it allows us to reach agreements between departments around pieces of legislation that overlap, and to try and find a way to streamline processes of public consultation and streamline processes of development of plans, and to streamline the process of development applications. So we are acknowledging those issues. We've noted them. We are we're busy with discussions. We're instituting process to try and address them. And we will be consulting with municipalities in that process so that we come up with something that's satisfactory for the various spheres of government to undertake their mandates. I'm hoping I've addressed the issues that people were raising. Thank you.
Thank you to the Chief Director, Mrs. De Grande. Can we then allow for Mrs. Milner, the Chief Director from Office of the Premier, to come through and address the issues between the alignment between the PGDS, SDF, and DGDPs?
Thanks, Amanda. I think a lot of what Lisa has indicated in her response actually applies to this as well. So I don't want to repeat what Lisa has said, because it's the same principle that applies. But colleagues must also be mindful that what the PGDS does, similar to the NDP, it provides us the policy context as well. So it's the broad umbrella which will guide us in terms of our provincial priorities and linked to what we are trying to aspire for as a country. Now, we are realigning and rechecking ourselves at that provincial level. So therefore, as we work with our municipalities and implementing the district development model, as we move towards the one district, one plan, that alignment to the national process also needs to follow. And I think we do need to be very critical of ourselves, because we know that most of the districts had adopted district growth and development plans, except one that I can recall offhand, but there was work being done towards that plan in any case. But with the plans we saw coming through from the district growth and development plan, in some cases became copy and paste. I mean, we saw indicators and targets there that could never be performed at a district level, purely because it was the mandate of the Premier himself, and not something a district municipality, for example, would be able to do. So with those quality concerns, we need to review the district growth and development plans in any event to make sure that we really do achieve what we want to, as Lisa has outlined in terms of the district development model, and make sure that there is better working between our provincial departments, national departments, as well as the local sphere, in terms of the priorities and how we're going to accommodate this mammoth task of service delivery with now even tighter budget controls and fiscal constraints. We're going to have to revisit it in any case, and we need to therefore be reminded that the process is definitely not static. And as we move to keep updating our plans and moving forward, the same will then apply with the different spheres at the district and local level as well. So I think that's the one lesson we saw coming from COVID now, is how quickly we've had to adjust plans when needed. And this is what we're trying to aspire to as well, and making sure that we narrow the gap between the time delays of national and provincial and local planning.
Mr. Masego, if you may come through and address issues, even though you've touched on COVID-19 issues, if you may just add on climate change issues, please.
Thank you very much. The two issues, Chair, climate change and COVID-19, are challenging us to rethink the way we do planning. Planning at a provincial level, but also planning even at a settlement level. I may not be able to address the question directly, Chair, but what I can indicate is that as part of the analysis, we are mapping all the areas that might be affected in different ways by drought, by other aspects of climate change. It could be floods and so on. And besides that, Chair, we are integrating various directives. The one that I can mention immediately would be the ones that talks to the systematic upgrading of informal settlements. That UISP program from the National Department of Human Settlement, it basically directs us as to how we can address the problem of informal settlements in an integrated manner. And there is also kind of a growing appetite that informal settlements can be upgraded gradually or incrementally into sustainable human settlement. But those that are located in areas that are not suitable for human habitation, indeed, they would have to be relocated. And there are, however, concerns as they relate to or relating to settlements in rural areas. Province has generated a lot of information. Province has mapped all the wetlands. Province has mapped catchment areas and all the areas where settlement should not happen. However, there seems to be misalignment between those who are allocating land, basically resulting in the growth of some of the settlements in areas that are not really suitable for human habitation. So this plan actually needs to start guiding those kind of things and responding in a strategic manner to issues of that particular nature. And as part of the implementation, which we'll deal with when we're dealing with the implementation plan, would be how then do we consolidate all this information and make it available in a simple, user-friendly manner to all those who are involved in issues of land use management, in land development, and decisions that relate to land management generally. The same, Chair, applies to COVID. Our settlements, maybe because we had never thought that we can have COVID. We may have had communicable diseases in the past. We managed to deal with them in a particular manner. But we had never thought that one day we would have something like COVID that spreads like wildfire. Basically, our settlements does allow for something like this to spread in a manner that it is spread. And it is now challenging us to rethink the way in which we model our settlements, in which we plan these settlements, and probably those who are even involved in the design of housing units, they need to rethink how they design their housing units in a manner that addresses issues of COVID-19. But in our case, Chair, it will be a case of mainstreaming the principle of spatial resilience and making sure that we're coming up with a Psdf that will enable province to guide different stakeholders in responding to these issues effectively. And again, be in a position to develop some of those in more detail in municipal SDFs and also regional SDFs. Thank you.
Can I allow Professor Umila Bob, because she's also responding to the issues around COVID, to come in, please? Thereafter, we will invite Commissioner, the Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Mchunu, to come through. Prof. Bob, are you able to come through? There's input that has been provided by Professor Bob with regards to COVID-19. It alludes to the fact that there will be cross-cutting themes, which will include gender and climate change and disaster resilience, which the COVID-19 will have to provide, which has provided us with many lessons that needs us to then reflect on this issue as well and integrate in our plans moving forward. With that said, can I then ask the Deputy Chairperson of the KZN Commission to come through, if possible? Other commissioners, you may come through as well before I hand over to Mr. Brooks to round the session off after the MEC. It looks like there's no further input that we're going to have from the commissioners and the MEC. Can I then invite Mr. Brooks to come through and round off the session for us and also give us a vote of thanks and closure? maybe before Mr. Brooks comes in, as he's about to come in, let me then indicate, colleagues, that we are highly appreciative of the input, the documents, the questions and questions of clarity that we have received in the chat room. Our chat room has been very live, and we have responded to some of the questions on the chat room, and we have responded to some of the questions here on this platform as well. Moving forward, we'll also be in contact and will provide feedback in as far as all the inputs are concerned. But we are highly, highly appreciative with the engagement that we have seen, and we acknowledge all the input and the comments that we have received. I'll now hand over to KZN Commissioner Brooks to come through and round off and close the session for us. Thank you. Mr. Brooks.
Chair, Amanda, thank you very much for that. And let me then also just acknowledge again, I see the MEC may have left us. I know it is a Wednesday, it's normally cabinet days, but we would start by thanking him also for making the time to at least have opened the session for us today. Also recognizing our chair of the Provincial Planning Commission, Mr. Msiwa, and his opening remarks. And I'm really not going to try and recall or repeat everything that has been said in this webinar. But I think Mr. Msiwa, our chair, started off getting this webinar on really a good platform by emphasizing the manner in which the spatial development framework is absolutely integrally linked to the growth and development strategy for our province. And that since we're reviewing both of them at the moment, well, it makes sense to review both of them at the same time. And this webinar really has just indicated the strong synergies and collaboration that exists within provincial government, in particular this case between the Office of the Premier and COCTA, but I would like to say that that same synergy relates and exists right throughout provincial government. We also particularly appreciate the attendance of our Deputy Chair. I'm sorry I don't see, I can see him on the picture, but I couldn't hear him participate. Also other commissioners that have made themselves available to attend the webinar, thank you very much. I think to all the attendees of this webinar, you'll realize that as the Commission meets, it tries and keeps an eye on the overall review of the PGDS and all components of it. As we align this version of the PGDS with the priorities of the sixth administration, in particular also as it's pronounced in the new MTSF that we have at this stage. The presenters we've had, Team COCTA, Team Office of the Premier, thanks very much for all the preparations that you've made for this. But then in particular, the attendees, I mean, all the panelists and attendees, I have my eye here on, I see we're now down to 77, but at one stage we had way over 140 participants in this webinar, which I think is really excellent. We've said it a couple of times already in this webinar, these are not ideal times for stakeholder engagement. We have to make use of what we have, and I think the electronic media that we're using at the moment is catapulting us literally into the fourth industrial revolution. We're almost been taken by the scruffs of our necks and pulled into this fourth industrial revolution, kicking and screaming, some of us. But this, I think, was a wonderful example of how we can still engage with one another in a safe manner, and that we can certainly still get good inputs through this media that we have. The seminar or the webinars that are coming up, the sectoral ones, we really would like to encourage everyone to please participate also in those, and then also keep your eyes open for similar webinars or engagements, electronic engagements via the Office of the Premier and the Provincial Planning Commission on the review of our growth and development strategy. I think Amanda and all participants, all dignitaries in this webinar, we all remain very committed to making sure that we deliver the best possible products that our province and our people of this province expects us to deliver. And even now, more so than ever, I've long had the saying that plans are good, plans are necessary, are never as good or as necessary when times are tough. When things are easy, you relatively meander quite easily through problems, and resources are available to deal with them. At this stage, we know we don't have the resources. We don't have the luxury of face-to-face engagements. We don't have the luxury of time. Our people are in desperate need. Our unemployment figures are way beyond 50% at this stage. We're seeing an influx of people and migration to our urban areas. We see what a risk that poses further for COVID and for a number of other of the social ills we have, for poverty in general. So let us all stay close to one another, as close as social distancing will allow us. Please keep on participating in platforms like this. It is really intended for us to collectively come up with the actions that we need to make sure that we deliver the next 5 years that can help our province to get to another level. I thank you very much for that opportunity, and thank you to all of you. I think with that, we then close the webinar, and hopefully we'll see most of you at the social webinar then tomorrow. Thank you, and please go well. I won't say travel safe, because I hope most of you are working from home anyway. I thank you.